serious Redditors who were taken away by CPS as a child. What happened leading up to it? What happened after? My parents beat me and my sisters. Mostly my dad. He was bad at managing his money and often wouldn't pay his bills. The power was shut off more than I can remember. The same thing with the water. I lived in 13 different houses by the time I was 11. We were homeless at one point, living in a one-room hotel room at a hotel for vagrants. Spent Thanksgiving on the streets. That year had dinner at a local mission. My mom wasn't a good housekeeper and the house was always dirty. For reference, they got kicked out of a house and after that the owners had to have a hazmat unit with the full Tyvek suits and had to remove all the carpet and the pads. Repainted and it still smelled like cats. I hate cats now as an adult because they had cats at one time. The most we had was 8. They didn't use a box or go outside. Getting taken out, I spent a week in a halfway house for runaways because there wasn't anywhere for me to go. Then a week in juvenile detention, not as a criminal, but because there wasn't anywhere for me to go. My sisters went to a home but there wasn't room for me. Once I finally got a home, things eventually got better. I got counseling to help with my issues that came from the prior living situation. I'm relatively normal now. I went in at age 12, out at 18. I'm 27 now, married, have 2 kids, and I'm a homeowner. I should probably do this on a throwaway, but hey, I'm not. There is a book about my mother and her custody battle for my younger sister called Sky, Child Interrupted. You can look it up on Amazon and leaf through the first few pages. Take it with a grain of salt. If you read it, the author idealized my mother in a way every man in her life did, and thought his situation was special, when it was not. I'm the 9-year-old daughter she loses in the beginning of the book. It's denied by the father, but there is a reason her children were taken. My mother and father were never married. My mom was who I physically lived with the majority of my life before foster care, but my dad was in and out between other men being around, if he happened to be in a period of time where he wasn't in prison. Both were the kind of addicts that provide a very specific life for the children they raise. Some of my earliest memories are pulling a needle out of my unconscious mother on the bathroom floor. I was probably 4, cleaning up her vomit, begging her to please wake up so that I could go to school today, and chasing cockroaches around whatever motel room we were living in at the time. Sometimes she would leave me with strangers for days or weeks at a time before coming back to collect me. I'm not saying she didn't love me, but she was the worst of addicts, and she was also very mentally ill. My mother was also a beautiful woman, so the way she supported her habit and herself in general was most easily done with her body. I was raised around a lot of strange men, and spent a good amount of my early childhood in the dressing rooms of strip clubs. I'm sure CPS had been called dozens of times, but I was first taken away when I was 6, and I was placed in a really incredible foster home for about a year. I know that there was talk of them adopting me. When I first arrived, I had a lot of behavioral issues and they worked through them with me until I had made strides of improvement. Then CPS sent me back home. My mom had done everything requested of her, and reconciliation is always a preference. Memories around this time of my life are pretty hazy, but I know that things either got much worse, or I was just old enough to internalize it more harshly. Anyway, I was taken away again in another state when I was 8. I remember it was Christmas Eve. I was in a number of different foster homes for the next 3 years. Memories are not hazy here at all, but I don't want to get into it. It was everything wrong with the foster system and extremely damaging to a child, maybe more so than what I had come from. But I do have a happy ending. My state-appointed therapist ended up adopting me when I was 11. She just had a feeling about me. From that age on, I was raised in a family that probably saved my life as far as providing me with the stability and the love I needed to become something better than the odds has been stacked for me. Very much my family to this day in every sense of the word. My mother died of an overdose 2 weeks before I gave birth to my daughter back in 2007. My mom married my biological dad cause she was pregnant with me. Previously, she had my brother in senior year of high school after being raped by an employee of the group home she was staying at. B.O. dad loved to drink, and he hated my brother. He wanted only his blood and his wife. So he decided he wanted my brother gone. Started to abuse him. My mom would shut us away when he came home drunk. I had nightmares for years as a kid of their screaming and fighting, him hurting her terrified expression when she locked us away, safe. Finally, he went too far. Burned my brother on an electric heater. Brother was treated for burns and parents were reported to CPS. Was removed from my mom for about 3 years. She fought tooth and nail to get us back. She was a good mother. She loved us. Did she make some mistakes? Yeah, she was a kid. She had been brutally abused since she was a baby. She'd only lived normally for about 2 years at this point. Our life experiences have a lot to do with things like this. She was a fantastic mom and loved us fully. She divorced the loser, married our amazing stepdad, and was the greatest mom on the planet until she died half a decade after she got us back. She was dealt a shit hand. Sure, she should've left my biological father sooner, but we all make our mistakes. She played the hand she was dealt and accepted the abuse of herself as normal and a necessary sacrifice after years of abuse at the hands of her foster family, rape, starvation, mental and physical trauma, by her siblings, parents, anyone who came around. When you grow up knowing NP other way, it's hard to make healthy normal decisions. I'm just glad we got the time we did. I wasn't taken away as a child, but I up until recently had custody of my 2 little cousins who were taken by CPS. My cousin has been on drugs for years. Honestly don't even know how she's still alive. She stole from every relative who ever tried to help her. CPS had been called numerous times on her from the time her kids were like infants. Nothing ever happened. Finally, she was going 40 in a 25 and got pulled over. She had heroin and pills sitting out in the open on the passenger seat and both kids were in the back seat. I got home from work to 2 police officers knocking on my door. They had asked her who she would want the kids to go with when she was arrested, and she said my mom and dad. We had them for a little over 6 months. The oldest went from not being able to read to reading 4 books a night and the youngest's behavioral problems got significantly better. All they needed was some love and attention. And now they're back with their mom. My biological mom was a drug addict when I was growing up. She would lock me and my little sister in the room when she would get high. She would shut us in there and tell us not to come out until she came for us. There was one day when I was 4 that she locked us in and didn't come back for us. My sister was younger than me and she started crying after a while. I can remember wanting to help her but not knowing how. My mom's friend eventually came over and found her unconscious laying on the floor. He let us out of the room and I just remember seeing her body laying lifeless on the floor and being so confused. He tried to not let me see, but I saw her anyway. She ended up surviving, but we were removed from the home. My sister and I were both adopted by our amazing dads, who ended up adopting again. I'm doing fine overall. I'm graduating from high school this year, and I'm part of National Honor Society. I played sports throughout high school. I still have issues with abandonment. Sleeping by myself still scares me. I'm lucky enough to have a brother close in age, who doesn't mind sharing. I have a hard time believing that someone loves me. I have a girlfriend and I know she loves me, but I still question it at times. I also am afraid to try drugs and alcohol, so I'm nervous about starting college. It's just a bunch of small things that make up my everyday life. I grew up in a pretty typical upper middle class family, except my mother was so sick she was on hospice at one point, clearly had mental health issues, and couldn't care for me, and my father was abusive. I remember I was at a school assembly when someone came to take me to the principal's office. I thought I was in trouble, but then everyone just looked sad and there were police officers there. I never went home again. I had no idea when I went to school that morning that it was all over. I was sent to care of kin foster care with family friends. They meant well, but I was 13 and angry. Eventually they sent me to a homeless shelter with my mom. By 15 I'd run away for good. Fast forward through a whole lot of horror, I'm okay now. I have my dream job, stable relationship and 2 little kids who will never ever have to live through what I did. I have a pretty good relationship with my parents, and I'm grateful for child services. I am, however, angry about how bad things got while I was falling through the cracks. My siblings and I, 7 years old and younger, were left in a padlock trailer in the middle of summer with no power/air conditioning. We lived in the south. I remember hearing a loud banging on the side of the trailer and some sort of scraping sound coming from the door. A firefighter busted in, and that's when I realized there were so many people in uniforms and flashing lights outside. I learned a little later that someone had heard us and called the police/CPS. My birth mother was a prostitute, an alcoholic/drug addict, and a gambler. I remember her saying she would be back, but it had been days at that point. I remember my adoptive mother telling me that if they hadn't saved us, then my brother would have died in the trailer. He was about 14 to 15 months old and unconscious, most likely from the heat and lack of food/water. My father was always mean. I remember him drinking and being angry all the time. My mother was kind and loving. My father was away a lot with working full time and drinking. He was very angry when he got home. He abused the both of us, but my mother got the most of it for protecting me. My mom tried to shield me because I was just a toddler. But one night my father snapped and started to repeatedly stab my mother in the chest. The neighbors heard screaming and called the police. My mother was dead when the ambulance got there, and my father was quickly arrested. CPS took me away because I didn't have any other family to take me in. My father lost his parenting rights and was not allowed to contact me till I turned 18. I was only 4 years old. I'm 28 now, and not a day goes by without thinking about my mom. Mother's Day was hard this year.